welcome. Quote Me on That podcast is an initiative of Quote This Woman Plus. Quote This Woman Plus, also referred to as QW Plus, is a gender justice organization that links women plus experts to the media. Quote Me on That introduces our women plus experts to the world. Welcome. Today we're sitting down with the powerhouse and possibility maker, Shireen Motara, social justice advocate, feminist leader, founder of Tara Transform and the Next Chapter Studio, and a mentor to many. She's here to talk about her courageous leadership, feminist philanthropy. Yeah, the words escape me. And why creating space for others isn't just generous, it's necessary for justice. So here we go. Welcome, Shireen.
Thank you, Rene, and for that elaborate introduction.
It's deserved. It's well deserved. Okay, so we're going to kick off immediately with what your early experience or value, what was your earliest or experience or value that shaped your commitment to the feminist leadership or to feminist space?
Yeah, I grew up in a community-orientated family, so it was always about community, but feminism was never a word that was spoken. I don't even think it was a word in my mother's vocabulary, yet she was always serving, helping, supporting, particularly other women. She was a social worker, and her work was about supporting families and women in particular. So I think that was my earliest exposure to it. I found the terminology when I was at university, and I joined a women's group, and that was supported by by UWC's Gender Equity Unit then. And through that group, we had training about feminism. I still remember one of the people that they talked about was Dulcie Doormat, about how we shouldn't be a Dulcie Doormat and, allowing people to walk all over us, people pleasing and so on. And of course, we still see a lot of that as far as the people pleasing is concerned. And that really cemented my commitment to feminism. So even when I started working, I didn't really want to work in corporate. I started there for about 10 months, but then got into women's rights work and never looked back. Just grew from there to the point where now I'm really more about supporting women's leadership, women's transitions, women's well-being within the social impact space.
That is incredible. I think when you spoke now about, having had the support to create an awareness around the terminology, around the philosophy, around the theory. It's something that I feel is so much needed now, because you use the word feminist and people look at you like, okay, what are you referring to? Or they have their own understanding and they don't understand necessarily where you're coming from. So I think something like that is what's really, really needed, and that I can see as a gap at the moment. So you've just spoken about kind of mentors really in your life. What did you learn about power, purpose, or visibility from those mentors or those guides? And I guess, yeah.
Yeah, I think in working in women's rights, I always had women role models, in a sense, women that I could look up to, women who were speaking out, who were popular, who were not popular, but that I really admired. And so from quite an early stage in my career, I also took up that. It was very challenging because I lacked self-confidence. I don't think I was assertive then, but I always pushed myself beyond my comfort zone. So I would do interviews, TV interviews, for example. My bosses would allow me to do TV interviews, even though I was in the area for 2 years or so. And that gave me the space to be able to embrace that, and to work through the challenges of that. So around purpose, I think the thing is that I've never lost connection with my purpose, which was, as I said, cemented at university. So even though I studied law, I have a master's in law and so on, law was never my purpose. I found my purpose at university, but not in the academic part of
Yeah.
university. And that has stayed with me forever. And the biggest thing I've learned about purpose is that if you work or you do things that feel disconnected from your purpose or what you are passionate about, you will never feel fulfilled. And so for me, it's always been that going back to, am I doing what resonates, in my heart, in my values, the things I want to do, the people I want to work with, and so on. So, that's for me what purpose is. It's the foundation to take you wherever you want to go. And if that foundation is rocky or not stable, then you'll always feel lost in the world. On the visibility front, I think, and I still see that challenge with a lot of women in particular, is like they're very scared of visibility. And of course, in the era that we live in, you can understand why social media, all of that. But I think that if I didn't take these uncomfortable steps around visibility, and are motivated by other women who have done that, then I wouldn't be where I am now. And a lot of people say, "Oh, you're so brave, you're so courageous," and so on. But for me, I need to do what's necessary to further the work that I want to do. And my visibility comes back to my purpose, the reason why I do what I do. It's never arbitrary, it's never vague. I hope that it's always meaningful and that it adds value.
Oh, that is incredible. Um, I think what you're speaking about is the fact that you have had this level of support from your mentors and you go forth and do the same for others. And it's amazing how women, particularly women, tend to shy away and they don't see their light, they don't step into their light. When they get told by others, that's only when it starts prickling. So I suppose women out there, let's talk to each other about what we see in each other so that it actually starts building. Otherwise, this person with immense potential is sitting and thinking, I can't do this, I can't go out there, I can't be seen.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, thank you. We're going to move on now to your many entrepreneurial hats. And I would like you to tell us about Tara Transform and the next chapter studio, please. What inspired it
Okay.
and what gap does it fill in the ecosystem?
Mm. So both businesses again are totally linked to my purpose and how I see myself in the world. Tara Transform emerged from how my career, in a sense, unfolded. I was always working in research, in women's rights training, and so on. And when I often struggled in the workplace. So my friends used to call me a job hopper because I couldn't last in jobs. I got bored very easily. 1 year, I feel like I've done everything and it's time to move on. Eventually, I got the message, which is, I'm not supposed to be an employee. I need to be doing things that excite me. And of course, it's not easy. But I did that I registered Tara Transform in a different form in 2001. So it's been existing since then, but I was in and out of it because of the fear of, the money, not enough money. I'm a single parent, all those kinds of things. But in 2016, I made the final decision to say, okay, it's now or never. And it took a good solid 3 years for it to become stable, for me to be able to get a salary, to pay my medical aid, and so on, and then to start giving other women opportunities through the work that we did. And Tara Transform is we define it as an African feminist agency that supports strategy, leadership development, and well-being in the social impact sector. So we work with primarily women-led organizations who are either large nonprofits, intermediary grant makers, or funders, and we support them in those areas. And we really do amazing work with amazing women leaders in particular. But not only women leaders, we have a range of organizations that we work with beyond South Africa and beyond the African continent as well. And of course, Tara Transform continues to work. It has a very good, strong reputation. Our clients know us. We have a good client base because our clients keep coming back because we pay a lot of attention to the quality of the work, but also the quality of our relationships with our clients. So we nurture our client relationships even when we are not working with those clients, because we know, that is important for us, but also for the work, the kind of work we want to do in the world. The next chapter emerged from that, essentially from the leadership development work we were doing with women leaders, and finding that I was coaching a lot of women leaders who were entering midlife, like myself, who were starting to think about, oh my word, where to from here? Like, what's the next? And it was also part of my own next chapter. So I moved out of Joburg in end of 2022, moved to the Western Cape, ended up in Langebaan, and I had planned that for a whole year before. Oops, sorry. Before before moving. So I wanted to have a different kind of life. As I was aging, I wanted to be near the sea. I wanted to have a slower life. I didn't want to have to deal with traffic and potholes and of course the security issues as well. So my daughter was not charmed at first, but she signed up and now she's of course very happy. So the next chapter emerged from that, and we officially launched it at our 2023 Gratitude Awards, which is also a significant event for us, which we're hoping to have this year again. And the Gratitude Awards also linked to that emerged from supporting and acknowledging women leaders in the social impact and social justice space across the continent, because I find that those women do so much, but hardly ever get recognition.
Very true. Oh my word. Everything you're saying, it's like, I'm sure even the listeners, it will resonate. And I can speak from experience. So you've been my mentor at some point in my life, and I did not listen at the time, but the penny dropped eventually. So thank you for that. You've been a mentor to many, as we said before. But also you always you speak about leading with courage. What does it look like in the real life, especially for women plus or women of color within the leadership space? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a different thing for everyone. I don't feel like, the way I do things should be the way someone else does it. Everyone has their own life experience, and that, in a sense, informs how we show up in the world. And speaking as a coach, I know that to be very true. And so I don't, even when I work with clients around leadership, it's never about courageous leadership, but it's about what do you want as a leader? How do you want to be in the world as a leader? I think that for me, I don't know about courageous. I just think it's about being authentic, authentic to my purpose and my values, and authentic to what I feel I'm here to do in the world. And then at some points, I guess having the faith that I can bring value, that I can help others, and then of course the other thing about courageous leadership for me is about vulnerability. And so I think there are people in the world who think like I overshare because I'm often quite open about my experiences and how it then relates to others' experiences, so people can find meaningful connection and understanding of the things that they are working with or struggling with. And I find that is quite important. I think we often shy away from vulnerability because we think it makes us look weak, but actually, I think that's courage. And I find that the struggle for many women leaders is actually showing vulnerability, because they think it's going to make them look weak. They think people are going to undermine them and so on. But if you don't do that, then you also will not have the deeper connection with
Yeah.
people. And we see in feminist spaces now in particular, there is a lot of tension, a lot of resistance, a lot of infighting, a lot of competition and so on. And I think it's because we have all built these walls of toughness that make us believe that we can't be vulnerable. And that, if we are vulnerable, then we are showing ourselves to be weak. And I am one person that says the complete opposite. I feel like unless you are showing up vulnerably, you truly yourself, you're authentic, not who you think people think you should be. For me, that's courageous leadership.
Yeah. That is very interesting that you say that, because I have been in spaces where when you even say a leader should be vulnerable and step into that, to connect,
Mhm.
it's for me, it's about the humanity, right? Because it shows someone can actually listen to you and go, okay, it makes sense, that sounds
Mhm.
right. But I often wonder if it's not because you are a feminist leader in a patriarchal system that normally, I mean, if you look at that at the gender, it's mostly they wouldn't show vulnerability. It shows weakness
Mhm.
in that context. And so it's interesting when women step into these spaces and occupy leadership spaces, that somehow the very tools that we are trying to dismantle form part of our armor. in a sense.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very true. I mean, systemically, we are shaped by that, right? We are shaped by how others show up in the world, how men show up in the world, how they think, but also the constant fight that we have as women to be seen, to be recognized, to have a voice, right? So it does help. We do become then quite resistant. We can become quite angry and so on and so on. But the challenge for us is that in our own spaces, why are we doing that?
Yeah.
In the spaces where we're supposed to be holding and supporting each other, why are we still fighting each other? Why are we resisting each other? Why are we not? We talk a lot about collective care, but we are seeing that we are talking the talk, but are we really walking the walk? And that for me is in the kind of work I'm doing right now around leadership. That is what I'm grappling with most and trying to wrap my head around, because I think that our feminist organizations are struggling, and they're struggling partly, of course, because of the systemic issues, which is the funding, the lack of recognition, the always fighting to be seen and heard, and so on. But we need to then create our brave, safe spaces internally that support us to fight that battle. But we are actually bringing the battle into our spaces. And that is why many of us are burnt out, exhausted, have chronic illnesses, and so on.
Yeah, very true. Thank you very much. And I'm glad you started touching on the funding issues, because my next question was going to be, what are some of the toughest conversations you've had around feminist philanthropy?
Yeah, I mean, I work with a lot of philanthropic feminist organizations, and the challenges are growing in that space. I mean, it's the challenge. The thing with the funding environment is it's quite a flavor of the month kind of thing, right? So a few years ago, up to last year, I would say we had LGBTI, for example, or maybe the year before, LGBTI being a big area of funding, lots of those organizations getting great support and so on.
Yeah.
Now we're into climate change, so now we're funding climate, everyone's funding climate and so on. And then what it does for feminist organizations is that they now have to try and think, okay, how are we going to survive this? And if we stay true to who we are, we may not exist in a few years. So it creates that kind of challenges, but that's the general funding environment. Feminist philanthropy is really about doing funding differently. It's really about thinking about how we give money to women's rights, to social justice, in ways that are responsive rather than directive. So, we want to understand how we work with organizations. We want to partner with organizations. A big thing about feminist philanthropy, for example, is shifting from this idea of project funding to general funding, because we trust our partners to be able to do what is required of them. The other thing is about funding well-being and care. That we take care of people, we take care of organizations. Some of the clients I have, they provide wellness allowances for their staff that they can use however they want to. So whether that's for medical aid or to invest it or for a massage or whatever the thing is.
Yeah.
But it's about, recognizing that the work that we do is tough, it's difficult, and we have to be able to support people in that. Feminist philanthropy is also about collective solidarity. So, how together do we make a difference? How do we fight the system together? How do we show our commitment together? How do we support each other? So you have different kind of feminist funding collectives, for example, made up of big players like the African Women's Development Fund, like CoFem, like Force Feminista, like, all those, the big funders, feminist funders, Urgent Fund. So I think that feminist philanthropy is showing a different way, but I think there's still a lot of resistance. And it's almost like, it's fighting a kind of a losing battle, because if you've seen what happened this year, of course, with the United States, it's created a new dilemma in a sense. And now it's almost become feminist philanthropy's gap to fill.
Yeah.
Because we feel these things so deeply, like, getting rid of money that is supporting AIDS response means creating a bigger burden for women as carers, as caregivers, as parents, and so on. So, there's the thing with feminist philanthropy is that they are really trying to show a different way. They are also moving away from, for example, funding big INGOs who then, drop little bits of money at community level,
Yeah.
to moving to funding communities directly. Also moving away from looking at organizations that need to be funded, but looking at movements as well, self-led movements and
Yeah.
their ability to bring change. So there's a big need for feminist philanthropy. The challenge is always that feminist philanthropy doesn't hold the money primarily, that they still get that money from other places, and that money often still comes with terms and conditions.
Absolutely. Oh my word. As you're speaking, I'm thinking about, just the struggle now with having to combat erasure of LGBTI community, or this
Mhm.
concept of gender in binary, or even diversity, equity, and inclusion kind of being
Yes,
a swear word. Where, yeah, so
yes.
so it's like going back and having to rebuild and reconceptualize and
Mhm.
imagine what it is to actually work in this particular period. Like you've said, there's many other movements or programs that needs to be run, it needs to be put out there, climate justice, or any of the others that you've spoken about. But just how does it actually fit into feminist work? Because
Mhm.
it does.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's a lot of conceptualization and a lot of
Yeah, if I could just say another thing about, I mean, one of the things that I'm seeing with my clients who are actually big funders in their own right, but still get funding from other places, is that their funding pots are shrinking also because of the political climate, right? If we look around Europe and the North, where money comes from, a lot of those governments are moving towards center-right or far-right government structures. And those are the people that don't want to fund women's rights, that are not interested in feminist movements and feminist movement building and so on.
yeah.
And as a result, where these feminist organizations and funders get money from these governments, that is also going to stop now. I know a client who's going to lose 50% of their total funding because the government that funds them has moved to a more right-wing government, and they've just decided no more. So, it's those kind of, the political climate plays a big role in how feminist philanthropy advances or not, because the money still comes from those places.
Sure. I don't even want to ask what the possibilities are, of resource mobilization within the sector itself,
Mhm.
and maybe diversifying, from what was, philanthropy coming or funding coming from a specific donor. How do we even start thinking about it differently in terms of getting things done and sustainability? Because we can't be in this position again in years to come, it's yeah, difficult.
Yeah, but I mean, we talk a lot about that, but it's not easy. If, for example, the kind of money feminist funders give out is big money because they fund lots of organizations and so on and so on. So even if we say, okay, let's get more individual funding, let's raise individual funding. Feminists must start giving their money individually to organizations and so on. It will just be a small drop in the pot of what is needed. And I think that, these questions are probably being discussed in feminist philanthropic spaces.
Yeah.
But I think it's again, women have to solve the problem, or feminists have to solve the problem. Now, not the system, not the countries and so on, but it's now feminists. Now you must go solve that problem, go find the money or solve the problem. So it's not, it's not an easy solution. And the thing is, like, we also are struggling with other systemic problems. If you look at Africa, for example, our political systems can be a little bit problematic. So even just trying to work with our African governments to improve funding for social justice, to get more localized funding. There's been lots of discussion about how do we, generate funding on the African continent. We have resources and so on, but it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So, so it's a very complex thing. And I think I'm not sure what the long-term solution is, but I think that we are definitely having to engage with what the potential other options are.
Yeah, geez. Okay. So there is a lot more to think about, a lot more for us to actually be out there, and part of different discussions, because I think that's the other thing, is that they can't be having conversations about feminists without feminists. So yeah, making sure
Yes.
the voices are in the spaces. Okay, Shireen, we are moving on now to vision and your legacy. And so, what does success look like to you beyond titles or recognition? What does it look like to you?
At this point, it's really wishing I had better health, physical health, um, and wishing I had paid more attention to my physical health when I was younger and not, showed myself as being a perfectionist and a multitasker and, going overboard, working weekends and, all of that kind of stuff, because it's all caught up with me now. So for me, and, a lot of people say wealth is in health. And honestly, I believe that, because right now, um, my success is really just that I can physically be healthy enough to do what I need to do. But then also that I have the space to rest um, and rejuvenate. So for me, the success is really about slowing down,
Yeah.
having peace of mind, and then being able to still do what I love in a way that I like doing it. So, for example, I love coaching. I love working with women one-on-one in coaching scenarios or with women-led teams. And I still want to be able to do that. And just as an example, for example, I was able to get a client whose head office is in Ghana, but who has staff across the continent, to bring a team that I'm working with to Langaban.
Oh, wow.
So that's success for me, because it means I don't have to fly somewhere. I don't have to, but I'm also bringing clients to a beautiful place, a space that's created just for them, and, that has the intimacy they need and the privacy they need to be able to do their work and to able to see a different part of the continent. So, that for me is success. I've never been about money. I've never been about being seen or recognized, but it's always been for me the slowing down, in a sense, the moving back from the fast life, from the overwhelm, from the overwork, and from the proving myself, to recognizing that, okay, I've done enough and it's my time to just be now.
Yeah. Thank you very much. My word, I'm listening to you and I'm like, okay, Rene, you need to pay attention to some of these things, as in listen and actually do some of it. So thank you. I'm sure there's many of the activists that will listen to this and that will actually think, okay, I need to slow down too. If our listeners walk away with just one call to action or truth from this conversation, what would that be? I think you've already touched a little bit about slow down, but is there anything else that you want to add?
Mm. Yeah, I have a message for feminists and something that is deeply troubling me of late, because of, our this internal contestations that we are having, and they're often not visible, but they're there. And I come to that as a coach, as a feminist coach. And the thing I want to say is we see the world as we are, not as it is. And often when we have these contestations with each other, we must understand our own contribution to how we are fueling or facilitating that, but also how we within us have the ability to transform that situation from a point that moves away from ego, and recognizes the beauty of that collective solidarity. So that's what I would say, because it's really sitting with me a lot recently.
No, thank you very much for that. So that was Shireen Motara reminding us that leadership is grounded in courage and vulnerability. I think that was more the word that she focused on, care and collective vision, that leadership will last for ages to come. And so it's something that's there. We just need to foster it. We need to be holding each other with kindness and slow down when your body tells you to do that. If you've loved this episode, please rate it, share, subscribe, and even follow all of Shireen's social media platforms, so that we are also amplifying the voices of our amazing experts that join us on these conversations. And until next time, stay bold, stay questioning, and never apologize for showing up fully in your power. I've been your host, Rene Sparks, and keep quoting Women Plus.